Let's break them down. We begin on Friday night with Indiana and Notre Dame. Danny, Indiana absolutely mauled like 9 or 10 of the opponents on its schedule. And then against 2, things were a little bit more difficult. Notre Dame is clearly closer to Ohio State and Michigan than they are to Purdue. Do you think Indiana? Where does this matchup hinge in terms of how it's going to go with the Hoosiers on the road?
I think Indiana's defense will be fine. I think they played really well against both Michigan and against Ohio State. Against Ohio State, the score got sideways. You had the 2 touchdowns that you gave them on special teams. So I think their defense will be fine. I think the biggest thing is, can they put points on Notre Dame's defense? Because they got stifled. I mean, that was the one thing we talked about after that Ohio State game, was they were overwhelmed. Curtis Worthman, was it the opening drive that they scored? They came down and looked great. And then the middle part of the game, the second and third quarter, and the fourth, when the game was kind of over, they were kind of garbage time, trying to come back. They were able to score some points, but for the majority of the game, they could not move the ball. That to me is, can their offense put up points against Notre Dame's defense?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at them statistically, they're top 2, top 5 in a lot of key categories. Points per drive, they're at 3.57. That's second. Their offensive success rate of 51.7% is tied with Miami for the best in the country. But you look at those numbers, and then you compare them to those 2 games we're talking about. They went from 3.57 points per drive on the season to 1.52 against Michigan and Ohio State, and their success rate in those 2 games dropped to 39.8%. Their explosive play rate, 15% on the season, 6.1% in those games. And even further, they didn't turn the ball over all year, but guess what 2 games they turned the ball over in? Michigan and Ohio State. So it is a serious question for me in this matchup, because Notre Dame's defense is at that same level. And where I think that this could be even more difficult is, I do think secondary-wise, Notre Dame is closer to Ohio State, and it's better than Michigan, because the Michigan team Indiana faced didn't have Will Johnson. They were banged up in the secondary. So they were even still able to really exploit that despite the guys they were missing. I don't know how explosive they're going to be. I feel like if Indiana is going to score points in this game, it's going to have to do it with 8-9 play drives, which are going to be very hard to do on the road, probably in these weather conditions. So it's a legit concern for this one. But I'm also with you, Danny, whereas I look at the defensive side of the ball, I think Indiana matches up pretty well. I don't think they will be as dominant as they have been, because I do think Notre Dame's offensive line is pretty damn good. And we saw them struggle against, good offensive lines this year, where they faced them a little bit. They didn't get overpowered, but they didn't have the same kind of success that you expected or saw in other games. So can they stop Riley Leonard? Can they stop the run game enough to force Riley Leonard to become more of a passer? Because that's not what Notre Dame really wants to do. It's not what Riley Leonard's best at. It's not what you're going to want him to do in these weather conditions. That's what they have to do to give themselves a chance to win this game, and they're going to have to force turnovers. So I think it's going to be a fun and interesting game. I don't know how confident I am in Indiana winning this game unless Notre Dame makes a lot of mistakes.
I think Indiana can win this game, but I, even after 13 games or 12 games, I still have some reservations about parts of Indiana's defense. I think that defensive line is actually pretty damn good, especially college good. And they have a couple guys who I think will play pro football, but also a couple who are probably just good for the college level. But even though I don't love the Irish passing game, where would you rank Notre Dame's passing game amongst the opponents Indiana has faced so far? I'll read them off here. Just tell me, when I get to a team you think is better. FIU, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, Purdue, Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is second, or maybe because that's back when Billy Edwards was healthy.
I was going to say Maryland might like a word.
They could chuck it around back then. When
and Ty Felton stresses your defensive backs in a way where you got to care about him.
Irish are unquestionably top 2 or top 3 amongst the best passing games that Indiana would have seen, which is not weird to say because it's a playoff game. So if they're not, then it's how the hell they make the playoff. But to me, that's sort of one of the weaknesses of the Irish team, and yet they're still, I think, demonstrably better than almost everybody Indiana has faced so far throwing the football. So totally agree. Your only real chance is to sell out against the run early, see if you can get Irish off schedule, and then maybe they fall back on the – look, they actually have not been very good, even relative to leverage at throwing the ball when they're behind the chains. And maybe, hopefully you have like a high variance day in your favor where maybe some picks or maybe just some of those balls going complete. But there is some chance that Notre Dame's like, oh, you're going to like load up the box here. We're going to come out throwing because we don't think they do that good at TV.
I don't think they can throw. I don't think they're very good throwing the football. I think if you can take away the run, Notre Dame could be in trouble. And I would flip the script and say, which passing offense has Notre Dame faced that's as good as this Indiana passing offense? Like they haven't really. Tyler Shuck was better.
Army, Navy.
Right. I mean, and when they faced Georgia Tech, it was without Haynes King. It was, and it wasn't even the other.
So they were better passing than they would have been with.
I mean, A&M certainly not a great passing team.
That was before Marcel Reed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
USC.
And that was their hardest. Like, if it wasn't for 2 pick sixes, that game's, and there were 2 pick sixes. They did get them, but still, like, they put up some good numbers on them.
No, it's a fair point.
Maybe it's a stupid question because, of course, a playoff team is going to be amongst the best you faced, or should be.
Right.
But yeah, like, is there a chance this thing shoots out?
Over?
Well, yeah, because I'm thinking, like, look, both these teams have not faced they faced a lot of, like, really bad quarterback play this year. Both of them.
My initial, like, right off the rip thought on this game was that it could be higher scoring. The conditions are the only thing. Like, if this game was played in Lucas Oil Stadium, I would think that it is set up well for both offenses to be able to have success. But with everything that's going on, where it might be a snow game, super duper cold.
The good news is it's
pretty good at the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I mean, we might just have a good old fashioned tough off.
It's not supposed to be too windy, so
I do think Notre Dame's very good up front, but they're more like, I don't know, like mid round of the draft type good. I don't think they have a lot of guys who are like top half of the draft. There's no chance to physically block them, But I mean, they have already faced Louisville, moved it on them. Louisville, I think, is the power ratings would say Louisville is basically the same quality of team as Indiana, right? Because Indiana's played a garbage schedule and blah, blah, blah. USC, kind of the same thing, but Indiana doesn't beat itself in the way those teams do. Can Notre Dame make them so uncomfortable that they do start beating themselves? Because the one time they did was that Ohio State ball game.
Also, no disrespect to Tyler Shuck and Jaden Maeva, but I think Curtis Rourke's a better quarterback than both of them.
Right.
Yes, 100%.
Do we know Jeremiah Love injury? Any update on that?
The intel I've got is that I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Yeah, and Cross too, supposed to be. Al Golden was talking about Cross should be good to go. And I know that when they had
Jagasaw going to play,
I have not heard anything along those lines.
Well, I mean, remember, it was like, in theory, he could make it back for a playoff game if everything went perfect. So just throwing that out there.